Have you ever stopped to think about just how small microbes really are? If you lined up 1,000 bacteria end to end, you'd still barely cover the width of a grain of sand. Viruses? They're so tiny you could fit millions inside a single bacterial cell. To study this small world, we need tools that bend light, sharpen detail, and reveal structures invisible to the naked eye. That's where the microscope becomes one of the most important instruments in all of biology and healthcare. Hi, and welcome to my channel, Learning Biology with Dr. Vanessa, where I take difficult biological concepts and make them easy to understand. Today, we're discussing microbial size, how magnification works, the principles of light microscopy, specimen prep, staining techniques, and how we use all of this to uncover the hidden architecture of life. Microbes exist on a scale far below what the human eye can detect. The unaided eye can typically see objects about 100 micrometers or larger, roughly the width of a human hair. Everything smaller than that, you need a microscope. So if we look into the world of microbes, we're talking about bacteria that are about 1 to 10 micrometers, the smallest being around 200 nanometers. Archaea is roughly the same size as bacteria. Protozoa is about 100 to 300 micrometers. Fungi about 3 to 4 micrometers. And we have viruses that range from 20 to 400 nanometers. These are far too small for even standard light microscopes. So we need to use electron microscopes to be able to see these. Though there are some viruses that can be as big as 800 or 1500 nanometers. Because these organisms push the limits of visibility, we rely on magnification and optical physics to see them clearly. A microscope doesn't just zoom in. It solves 3 huge problems: magnification, resolution, and contrast. Magnification is how much larger the image appears compared to the actual object. To find out the total magnification, we take that objective lens, which in normal laboratory microscopes, you can have a 4x, a 10x, a 40x, sometimes a 60x, and then a 100x, which is going to be our oil immersion objective lens. So we would take that objective lens number and we would multiply it by the ocular, which is usually a standard 10x if you're using a standard laboratory microscope, and you would multiply them together, your objective times your ocular, to find out what your total magnification would be. Resolution is the ability to distinguish 2 points as separate. High magnification is useless without good resolution. It's the difference between a blurry blob and a crisp, detailed structure. Light microscopes are limited by the wavelength of visible light, but we can improve resolution by using that oil immersion lens, which is usually that 100x objective. So why does the oil help? What happens is light is going to bend when it passes from glass to air and then glass again. And that bending is going to scatter the light and reduce image clarity. Immersion oil has the same refractive index as glass. So when you place a drop between the slide and the 100x objective lens, then the light is prevented from scattering. More light is then going to reach the objective, and because of this, the resolution increases dramatically. Oil immersion lens can resolve images that are at least 0.2 micrometers in diameter and at least 0.2 micrometers apart. This allows you to clearly see tiny structures like bacteria that would otherwise appear faint or blurry. Contrast is what makes the specimens stand out from the background. Most microbes are nearly transparent, so stains or special lighting techniques are used to make them visible. A key concept in contrast is the refractive index, which is a measure of how much light bends when it passes from one medium to another. Glass, water, cytoplasm, and air all bend light differently. When 2 materials have very similar refractive indexes, like a bacterial cell in water, very little light bending occurs between them, so the image has low contrast and is hard to see. When the refractive indexes are different, edges and structures become clearer because light bends more sharply at the boundaries. So to improve contrast when we're looking at microbes, we use stains and dyes, which attach to the cells and make them darker or colored, or we can use special lenses or techniques like phase contrast or differential interference contrast microscopy, which enhance differences in refractive index without staining. Let's take a quick look at the different types of microscopes. We have the bright field microscope. This is the classic teaching microscope, and it uses visible light, so it is great for stained specimens. Then there's the dark field microscope, which makes specimens glow against a dark background, so this one is great for live, thin microbes. There's the phase contrast microscope, which enhances contrast in living cells without staining. The fluorescent microscope, which shines ultraviolet light onto specimens that have been treated with fluorescent dyes. This makes them emit a bright glow, and it is essential in diagnosing infections and visualizing cellular structures. And then there's the electron microscopes, where we can have transmission electron microscope or scanning electron microscopes, and these use electrons instead of light, allowing us to see viruses and ultrastructure, so the finest of all microscopes. Let's take a look at preparing specimens for the microscope, fresh versus fixed. Fresh preparations are going to include wet mounts and hanging drops. These fresh preparations are going to show cells that are live and active. The wet mount consists of a drop or two of culture that is placed on a slide and overlaid with a cover slip. The hanging drop is a drop of culture that is placed in a concave depression slide. Both these preparations are going to allow for natural movement, shape, and behavior of the cells. So it is used for protozoa, yeast, and motile bacteria. Then we have those fixed preparations that are going to be able to be stained. So a fixed stained specimen is going to be a more permanent slide that is used when you need detailed or long-term study. This smear technique that was first developed by Robert Koch involves spreading a thin film of liquid sample onto a slide, letting it air dry, and then gently heat fixing it over a flame. Heat fixation is going to kill the microbes and firmly attach them to the glass. Heat fixation is required for nearly all staining techniques. After staining, these cells show clearer structural detail and have a longer shelf life. Unstained cells in a fixed smear are often difficult to see even with strong magnification and good resolving power. Staining is what makes those cells visible by applying dyes that interact with cellular structures, increasing contrast. Basic dyes carry a positive charge. Acidic dyes carry a negative charge. Because bacterial cells contain many negatively charged components, such as nucleic acid and cell wall structures, they readily attract basic dyes, which bind to the cell itself. Acidic dyes are negatively charged and repelled by the cells, so these dyes color the background, making them useful as counterstains or for negative staining techniques. Let's talk about some different types of staining techniques. First, talking about positive versus negative staining. In positive staining, the dye is going to stick to the specimen and give the specimen a color. This uses basic dyes like crystal violet, methylene blue, or safranin. In this type of staining, the cells are going to appear colored against a clear background. And then there's negative stain, where the dye is going to stick to the background, not the cell. So in this case, it's going to use acidic dyes like nigrosin or India ink. The cells are going to appear bright against a dark background. Then there's simple versus differential stains. Simple stains use one dye in a single step. All cells will appear the same color, making this technique ideal for observing basic cell morphology, which includes the size, shape, and arrangement. Differential stains are going to use a primary dye followed by a counterstain to distinguish different cell types or specific structures. These procedures are more complex and require additional reagents and rinse steps between the dyes. Common examples of differential stains include the gram stain, acid-fast stain, and endospore stain. Let's take a look at some of these major differential stains, starting with the Gram stain, which was developed by Hans Christian Gram in 1884. This classic technique uses a step-by-step application of several dyes and washes. First, you would put your crystal violet, which is the primary stain that has a purple color, on your fixed sample. Then, you would follow that with iodine, which is the mordant that locks in the dye. If your cells are capable of taking in that crystal violet, iodine makes sure that it stays there. After the iodine step, there is an alcohol rinse. This is the decolorizer, removing crystal violet from any cells that did not take that color in. And then finally, it is followed by safranin, which is the counterstain, staining everything that didn't take the crystal violet in pink. So when you look at your cells underneath the microscope, you will either see purple or pink cells. Gram-positive cells are purple due to their thick peptidoglycan cell wall that is going to retain that crystal violet dye. Gram-negative cells are pink. This is because the alcohol removes the primary stain from their thinner cell wall, allowing that counterstain, safranin, to take over. The Gram stain remains the foundational tool for bacterial classification and is clinically essential for guiding antibiotic decisions. There's also acid-fast stain. The acid-fast stain is used for bacteria with waxy, lipid-rich cell walls, such as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. These cells hold tightly to carbonyl fuchsin, a red dye that is pushed in by heat. Even an acid alcohol decolorizer can't remove it. Acid-fast cells stain bright pink, and non-acid-fast stain blue after the counterstain. And then there's the endospore stain. Endospore stain reveals tough, dormant spores produced by genera like Bacillus and Clostridium. This staining technique is similar in principle to the acid-fast method in that it uses heat to drive dye into the tough endospore. This stain distinguishes between spores and vegetative cells. Vegetative cells are the normal metabolically active cell, and endospore is the dormant or survival form. And then there are special stains. Special stains are designed to highlight specific cell structures that don't show up well with standard staining techniques. Capsular stain is used to visualize the protective gelatinous capsule surrounding certain bacteria. Because capsules repel most dyes, this method often uses a negative stain, such as India ink, making the capsule appear as a clear halo around the cell. There's also flagellar stain, which reveals bacterial flagella, which are extremely thin, hair-like structures that are used for movement. The staining process builds up layers of dye or metal to thicken the flagella, making them visible under the light microscope. The microscope doesn't just make tiny organisms bigger, it gives us access to an entire universe of structure, behavior, and identity that shapes every part of human health. If you enjoy the content of this video and want to keep learning how microbes affect the body, please make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and turn on notifications so that you never miss out on new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.